Hi everyone, thanks for making the left turn and welcome back to the George Farrar channel. I'm George Farrar. The Farrar Report normally scheduled for this Sunday will not be seen but will return with an all-new Farrar Report on Sunday, July 20th. I'm now very excited to bring to you a special presentation on the Left Turn Network from the TheJaxLife channel, a special about the Norman Silent Film Studios, and also George's Arlington. Enjoy.
Hi everyone, thanks for making the left turn and welcome back to the TheJaxLife channel and welcome back to our continuing series here on the channel, History Jacksonville. I've got a big History Jacksonville for you today. I'm here in Arlington off of Arlington Road, right here in the center of Arlington, and we're going to talk about Arlington history, which itself starts out really as a history of an industry in Florida that eventually in a lot of ways moved away, but there's a lot of great things happening still here in Jacksonville, so we'll talk about the first 30 years of the 20th century, and then I'm going to talk later on a little bit more about Arlington as it was with me growing up in the late 70s, early 1980s here, so I'm very excited to be able to bring this to you, so let's go ahead and get started. After the Great Fire of 1901, Jacksonville was booming and it was building up, and there was a new industry that was coming to town, and that was movie making. Movie making was just getting started, and Florida, Jacksonville, Florida, had the perfect climate for it. You could film year-round, you could film in the summer, and you could also film in the winter when it would be snowing up north. People could get on the railroad and come down here to Florida, come down here to Jacksonville, and film. So there was a development of all these different film companies, and it was big. There was a lot of movie making that was going on in Springfield and downtown in the old days, and there was all of this happening, and it was really big. But then, as with some industries, there were some downsides to the film industry. People didn't like the fact that there were different chases down the road on Sundays, down the streets of downtown in Springfield, and there was a lot of controversy about it, and so a mayor, John W. Martin, was elected in 1917, and he promised to essentially run the film industry out of Jacksonville. And so we had that happen, but here in Arlington there was constructed, before that happened in 1916, Eagle Studios. Now, Eagle Studios went bankrupt. The film industry began to leave Jacksonville around 1917, 1918, and they went out west, out to California. And you know what happened then, Hollywood and Los Angeles. And so there was continuing, though, an industry, a smaller industry, and there was a man named Richard Norman, and he was born in Middleburg, Florida, just south of here. And he went around touring the Midwest, and he would get local folks in the Midwest in different cities, different communities, towns, to act in their own films. He would produce the films, and they would star in them and act in them, and then they would be displayed right there in the local small town or city movie theater. And they were called townies, and it was an interesting thing. Now, he bought the bankrupt Eagle Studios facilities, of which there are 5 buildings, and I'm in front of the main building, and he called it Norman Laboratories. And he began to work on developing silent films for African Americans. There was an entirely untapped market of filming for African Americans. And he really did some great things. Starting in 1919, he did some great movies. In 1926, he did an air travel or air thriller called The Flying Ace. And it was valued so much in history that the Library of Congress actually has kept a restored copy of it as part of our American film heritage. He also filmed in 1928 Black Gold. All of these were African American starring films for an African American audience. And so he did this, and it was something that was different at the time because in the 1920s there was a lot of bigotry and racism. So he was clearly a different man in the times, and was able to put out some great films. And he did local films for local audiences, and it worked out really good for a while. And then, though, sound came around. There had been silent films in the 19-teens and the 1920s and before that. But then, in the late 1920s, films started to begin to where they could have the technology to put sound into the film. And he worked on a particular technology that would have enabled that. But just as he was getting that going, another technology for sound came along, and that became the standard and became what was used. And he continued to do filming and do films into the 30s. He died in 1960, and these buildings here still stand. And as a youngster in the early 1980s, I would be riding along, and I would look over here, but I didn't really know what to make of what was here. But it wasn't until this was discovered in the 1990s. It was discovered in the 1990s, and we were able to the city of Jacksonville was able to start a restoration that culminated in 2007 with the restoration of the exterior and keeping the building up structurally. So that was a great thing. Now there's a museum, and there's a 501(c)(3) organization which is trying to really to where ultimately more can be done with this facility. A reminder of the old days in Jacksonville. You know, Arlington really didn't get taken off, though, as a big, sprawling suburb until after the Matthews Bridge was constructed in 1953. When the bridge came, the development came, people began to move out of downtown and out of Springfield to live in small houses and later on larger houses and luxury houses built in the late 1940s, the 1950s, the 1960s, into the 70s. Now, and we're going to take a look at what was going on out that really spurred the development out there off of Arlington Expressway and really got Arlington going. And then I'm going to talk about my life growing up here in the late 70s, early 1980s, and we'll take you back in time. We're going to go to some interesting places, and we're going to see where things are at right now. So I'm going to do it. I'm going to say it. Let's roll it.
I have a special for you today. It's called George's Arlington. I'm going to look back, I'm going to reflect about Arlington and my life in the late 70s, early 80s. And boy, back then, this place was hopping. Right now we're on the Arlington Expressway, and we're about to approach Arlington Road. And I'm going to share with you my neighborhood, where I grew up, and some of the interesting experiences I have had. And so what a fun time here on the TheJaxLife channel. Growing up in Arlington in the late 70s and early 1980s, I would really enjoy my weekends at Jacksonville's retail mecca, the Regency Square Mall. It was built in 1967, and quite an amazing place As a youngster, I would once in a while meet my mother, along with my father and my stepmother, at the Woolworths restaurant. Woolworths had a restaurant back then, a lunch counter and a restaurant area. And there was a Piccadilly, so once in a while on Sundays, I'd be going to dinner after church at the Piccadilly. Lots of different stores, B. Dalton, Radio Shack, JCPenney, Sears opened at the mall in 1981, and then a new wing was added, so a lot of walking, a lot of fun times. I enjoyed eating the cookies at there's a cookie place, and so fun time. And now, of course, the mall is a little bit different. They're working on building up their occupancy. Things have been a little bit different since I think around the early to mid 1990s at the mall. But I do hope that it can really get itself together and going. And I'm optimistic about the future of Arlington.
I grew up in the Arlington Manor neighborhood of Arlington from the summer of 1978 to the summer of 1983. And we're now about to make a left-hand turn onto Morgana Road. I'm on Lone Star Road, turning onto Morgana. These houses were built in the early 1950s. The house I'm going to show you, where I grew up, was built in 1951. It was an old house. It had a furnace, and I had a lot of good times. I had a great backyard. And of course, as you get older, you grow up. What seemed like such a big neighborhood, or big street, is really not as big as it was growing up. Of course, and to the right, 1477 Morgana Road. Until the summer of 1983 in this house with my father, Terry Farrar, who was an engineer at Channel 12 and then later Channel 4, where he spent most of his career, was at Channel 4. And with my stepmother, who was a homemaker at the time, and with my baby brother, TJ, John. And he died in 2007. My father died in 2005. The neighbors around here, at one point there was an elderly couple, the Greens, who lived in this house. In this house, which looks like it's for sale, the Barons. Now let's check out Arlington Heights Elementary. I spent the early 1980s at Arlington Heights Elementary School in the first grade and second grade. My first grade teacher was Miss Johnson. My second grade teacher was Miss Wilson. And you know, it's important in life to get a good start. And I got that good start here at Arlington Heights Elementary. Sometimes I would get rides home from the neighbors, and we would meet at the flagpole for the ride home. Arlington Heights Elementary. is what used to be the Arlington Theater. I'm not going down Lone Star Road, and a lot would happen on Lone Star Road growing up. This is where I would go shopping with my stepmother and my dad, and also where I would attend church. There's also a laundromat down here. These were the early days of growing up. I wasn't always a big fan of going to the supermarket, and in the early 1980s, this was the Winn-Dixie supermarket, and this was pick and save. You could get anything I think you really needed out of these two stores, and if you were hungry for fried chicken, there was the Kentucky Fried Chicken, and behind it a convenience store and the laundromat. I believe it was like Coin King or Coin Kingdom or something. But now, of course, you can see that the economics of my old neighborhood have changed, and now it's a evangelic center and a charter school, it looks like. Lone Star Road, and we're now going to check out where, as a youngster, I would worship. As a youngster in the early 1980s, I attended the Reorganized Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, which was an offshoot of the Mormon Church before the Mormons went to Utah. And I was baptized. I was baptized in this church. It's now called the Community of Christ. But the symbol on the sign was essentially the symbol of the church in the early 1980s, so it still is. And so the church played a role in my formative years, in the early years, the foundation years of my youth. I was baptized here, good people, great people that I would come to know, but I moved on in my life, and I'm an agnostic now, but there were some very basic values and certainly some good feelings out of the congregation of this church in the early 1980s. In the summer of 1983, I moved to Mandarin, and it was a different feeling, and the folks were different. And I would come back here to this church. If anything, it was a constant in my life in the early 80s to the mid 80s until my family split in February 1988. But I can be thankful for the neighborhood, the community, the neighborhood that I lived in Arlington, the neighbors, the congregation, the people that helped get me on the right course growing up. Thanks for watching this episode of History Jacksonville. You not only saw Jacksonville history, but you had a chance to see my history, and I thank you for watching. Take it easy. See you later.